sacrifice deck here with a little bit of a combo finish. So we're gonna get right into our game and see if we can't pick some winners here. So harsh there with the losers match. You know, I like Kanister, I like Caleb. They're both good guys. You know,
and both
so,
great players too. So
yeah, fantastic. This is a really powerful pod, and then I'm here too, which is a little scary. But
you're
all right,
you're selling yourself short. You're definitely a scary opponent, and you probably had the fastest win in any of these matches with your first round against Kanister.
Came in clutch. So we see a mulligan here from Kanister's side, going down to a bunch of Urza Sagas. We see a Flare and a little 1/1 fodder creature and a Boots. Pretty interesting hand of some eclectic cards. On Caleb's side, we got some Bogger Trawlers, Chthonian Nightmare, Gravecrawler, Bowmasters, 2 lands. So Caleb's hand's looking pretty nice. Kanister, not so much though. What do you think is kind of important here as far as from Kanister's side, from trying to both navigate the sacrifice elements but not die to the combo?
Yeah, I think the blue flare is definitely going to help not dying to the combo. Hopefully, can be able to counter the nightmare or the soul trader, like one of the key pieces.
Because he's actually a mulligan on the 5, unfortunately, for Kanister. So Kanister's got a bit of a rough one here. A lot of weight on Urza Saga's shoulders. We see turn 1 Blood Crypt and Gravecrawler from Caleb. And again, hand kind of rolled up here with Bowmasters and Nightmare all ready to go. We see a Morgul Knife. That's a Shadow Spear from Lord of the Rings. So obviously a card you want to get off Urza Saga, not necessarily right when to naturally draw. I think you mulligan to 5. So kind of a lot of work for Kanister here.
Same thing with the Boots, I think. Like these are cheap artifacts which do work with what Kanister's trying to do, but they're not really cards you want to draw. They're cards you want to just find with Urza Saga, or maybe just have one of them. There's a lot of better hits, I think.
Yeah, now they are junky artifacts for Affinity. We see a Thought Monitor drawn for Kanister. The Watcher comes down, kind of a draft common from that all v1 format, which is pretty interesting. And does sack the Flare very well and draws a card. And it looks like we're going to see an end step Bowmasters here. Going to take out the Watcher. No, maybe not, actually. We see a Flare. So going to attack the Watcher, doing the thing. The thing has been accomplished, right? You sacrifice a creature as a card to a Flare. Bada bing, bada boom. Bowmaster is down. The problem is the exchange of resources there. Pretty tough for Kanister.
Oh, absolutely. And then also the fact that Caleb has this Nightmare that we know about that just bring the Bowmasters back. It's pretty tough spot. I mean,
wow, looks like Caleb's gonna go for a little trawling here. She's gonna play the 3/1. Gonna exile a Kanister's graveyard and attack with the Gravecrawler. Trawler is not a zombie; it's a goblin, so that won't help with any Gravecrawler recursion, but just adding more pressure to the board. What do you think about that? About playing the Trawler, kind of getting more power on the board rather than trying to play Bowmasters off the
I think I like it. I think if the Bowmasters was a zombie and you could replay the Gravecrawler, that's another thing. But you're actually staying with the same amount of power on the board by playing the Nightmare instead, and you'll have another opportunity.
See another Trawler drawn here from Caleb. Another Watcher coming down from Kanister, but no land drop, unfortunately, and Saga's about to go away. Here comes the Nightmare, and pretty good looking turn here for Caleb. It's a Nightmare, get back the Bowmasters, kill the Trawler, and have a death trigger will happen with the Bowmasters in play. So another Bowmaster trigger, and things are looking pretty awesome on Caleb's side. What's Kanister going to need to kind of like get back into this game?
I think basically if Kanister can land one of his powerhouse cards like Urza, kind of can trump the kind of mopey beatdown plan that Caleb has here, since Caleb hasn't really assembled any of the actual combo pieces with Soul Trader or the Marionette. And without those, it's kind of just attacking with a bunch of small creatures. And the Flare can answer, let's say, an Urza token, but it won't necessarily answer the theirs itself, but leaving something behind basically to be able to block off these other creatures is potentially gives Kanister the chance to come back into the game and use some of these cards like the Thought Welder to build an advantage.
Yeah, the problem here, unfortunately for Kanister, is his deck is kind of like a critical mass deck. Like, you're trying to get a lot of artifacts in play that can grow the Urza token big, get the monitor for cheap. But because of the double mulligan, just kind of light on resources here. And then the Saga goes off. It can get an Aether Spellbomb, which it does. but again, now down a mana also. So we see looks like a Mox Amber coming down for a little extra mana. But in response, we're going to see Bowmaster go to the bin and a Flare, Flare Day, right? Going to come down and kill the Emery. So no recursion there. And now we see Kanister on one land with a kind of a junkyard of artifacts in play. A Shadowspear, a Mox Amber, an Aether Spellbomb, and a lot of Spare Boots. I wonder if that combination of cards has ever been in play before. And untaps over to Caleb, who's got a Gravecrawler. Now the Nightmare is going, and then we can see the power of his Custodian Nightmare card just kind of over and over and over again, recurring things.
Yeah, and the second Gravecrawler lets Caleb recast them from the graveyard, so it never runs out of creatures to sack to the Nightmare. And yeah, it's an eclectic group of permanents and Kanister side, and he's really gonna have one more turn here to try and stay alive. But now I think it's at the point at 5 life that even a ground force isn't enough, because death from death from Archer pings would.
Yeah, it's funny because we were making fun of Kanister's board. Caleb's board, the creatures aren't that impressive either. We've got like, a random token, a 3/1 goblin, but good enough to get it done on Kanister's kind of tough draw there. So going into game 2, and then of course the post sideboard games, who do you think gets the advantage here in sideboarding?
Well, again, it's interesting because both decks are sort of critical mass decks, right? Caleb is trying to accumulate sack outlets, creatures, and payoffs for sacrificing them, whereas Kanister's trying to build up, artifacts and then the payoffs for them. So you can't really change too much of like your core deck. And we also don't really see either player having too many great cards to bring in.
You see one cool card we see from Caleb's side is the orangutan, which is it's an ETB, kill an artifact. So another kind of cool recurring nightmare card, where if you can get the recurring nightmare going at that, you can pick up all the artifacts one by one. No way to like tutor it up or anything like that, but kind of a good card naturally drawn. But I see what you mean here for sure, though. Like, we're not really seeing many cards come in on either side, so mostly to see that main decks kind of do their thing. And how's Kanister going to get in front? What's a game where Kanister wins look like?
I think like if Kanister can start with a creature and a Mox or something, it's very easy to kind of pull ahead with that mana advantage, especially on the play. Caleb's deck doesn't have that much spot removal besides the flares, so let's say a Tamiyo could really pull Kanister ahead. Something I would consider if I were Kanister, though, is bringing in these Haywire Mites. They are they're again a cheap artifact, so they can't be that bad for that reason. And the ability to kill the Clonian Nightmare, which unlike where you can actually nab it, unlike recurring Nightmare, because it has a trigger when it comes into play. So
that's true. Yeah, so using the energy trigger against it, which is kind of sweet. It's kind of a difference between the two cards. Yeah, also it just kind of blocks against in life too, right? If it just blocks a 3/1 or a Gravecrawler, that can buy a little more time to get going too. So
yeah, and I think like this would be a matchup where I would consider, because kind of the cards are all sort of similar. Blue Flare is a little weaker because you're sacrificing multiple resources for one of your opponents, and when it's really important when one of those cards, let's say, is Nadu or Necrodominance, right? Like a one-hit card that's just going to pull your opponent super far ahead. But when it's like Stitcher's Supplier or Gravecrawler, you don't really want to be casting your Flare.
all right, so we see turn 1 Tamiyo here from Kanister, who has a Flare backup, a Saga, and a Monitor, and a pretty stocked hand from Caleb here. Also, just going to fire up a land and Fatal Push. You see the Boggart Bog coming down here for 3 life in lieu of a fetch land or a Mutavault. So playing them the Shock MDFC pushing, and we see from Kanister we see a Ursaga come down and then pass up the turn. And now the supply chain starts. Such a supplier comes down. In the top 3 cards, we see Marsh Flats Trawler, and then maybe is it a Nightmare? And fetch line comes down. So you can see a Gravecrawler also. Unearth also in the mix. Kind of a cool card that's doesn't see a ton of play, but kind of fits well with the graveyard theme here. And we're going to see it come right back in. It's a Marionette Apprentice, actually. So Apprentice comes in, fabricate 1, and make a token or a counter. I imagine we'll see a token here. There we go. And these black flares look pretty good here.
They do, yeah. In this matchup, like a lot of Caleb's things do their job by coming into play, and then dying is a benefit. So the black flare is good, whereas all of Kanister stuff wants to stay in play. So the blue flare is pretty awkward. Like on the first turn when we saw Fatal Push, if Caleb didn't have that Fatal Push, playing a Stitcher Supply or a Gravecrawler and then sacrificing into the flare is perfectly fine. Whereas if Kanister wants to stop that, what is his recourse? He's just the only way to protect his creatures by sacrificing it anyways. And we see kind of Kanister now with just a bunch of clunky, expensive cards.
Yeah, these not a lot of affinity happening here. Affinity count is currently, I guess now it's 1 with the construct token in play. But yeah, the black flare certainly has that benefit of like, blue decks and red decks or whatever don't necessarily get value from sacrificing the creatures, whereas black decks are almost built for the flare with cards like Gravecrawler and Friends. So we see construct token comes in, and then we see a chapter 3 on Urza Saga. In response, another construct comes in. So a little bit bored now. And then, of course, we'll see a sack on the saga to go get something. This helps the artifact count a bit here, but we're looking at Kanister's hand. It's a little rough. We see a few lands here, 2 monitors that still cost a lot of mana, and then the flare with no blue creatures in play. So Kanister's a lot of work to do, but these bodies will help keep him alive.
Yeah, and the Soul-Guide Lantern does some work here too, I think, getting rid of the Gravecrawler.
Yeah, so Soul-Guide Lantern's the fetch up here, and I can do some graveyard hate. And you get these things to it. Being a 3/3 is also pretty relevant as far as these constructs go. So the flare can still kill the constructs, right? Even though they hit the highest mana value, the highest mana value is 0, can still kill one. And now we got a Soul Trader. So what happens here?
Yeah, this is a pretty interesting spot. So, okay, if we just, again, as I said before, if Caleb had a higher life total, the game would just potentially end. But 1, Caleb doesn't. 2, there's also this Soul-Guide Lantern that can be popped to interrupt the combo. But some attacks might happen here. It's gonna be kind of tricky, I think. How usually I've noticed this combo plays out is the threat of it is stronger than the execution. It's a saying from the chess world where often threatening to do something cause your opponent to make plays around it. Like this Soul-Guide Lantern basically has to potentially be sacrificed just to nab 1 Gravecrawler, which is not a exciting exchange.
And kind of the old Splinter Twin problem where like they might or might not have it, but the fact they have to play this game constantly in this state of fear is very, very beneficial. So see the trader come down. We're going to see a sacrifice on the Gravecrawler. So we're going to kind of make things happen here. And that'll bite out the Soul-Guide Lantern. However, that does shrink down the construct now down to a 1-power creature. And again, keep the affinity off the board for Kanister, kind of getting that critical mass down and now being able to attack as well. So another flare is a draw for Kanister. So the awkward gets even more awkward. You see Cavern Souls come down, and 2 flares, 2 monitors, and a Misty Rainforest. A little interesting to see the Cavern Souls over the Misty, right? Maybe you could have gotten a Surveil Land or something.
Yeah, it seems like Kanister's probably valuing his life total pretty highly, maybe, and is thinking that 1 life from the Misty might really matter in this spot where there's kind of a lot of drains for 1 happening.
Yep. So fire up the Meta Vault, and in comes a big attack. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and you're right with the Apprentice in play. Every point of life is going to matter because things that die are going to really get things going in the sack out to do that too. We see no blocks, so down to 6 life points for Kanister, and a lot of work to do. We see Force join the flare in hand. How about a trio? How about a full house? Playing poker today, or what? We got monitors over flares, and
yeah, kind of crazy spot. I think actually that Caleb could have maybe killed Kanister on this last turn because the Marionette actually triggers off of artifacts dying as well as creatures. So every time you sacrifice a creature, it gives you an artifact to sacrifice as well, right? From the
right, yeah. So
sacrificing the token and the Mutavault would be 2 more. So that would be 2 damage plus 3 artifacts is 5 damage, and then you cast the flare, sacrificing the Worn Soul Trader, and that would have been the last point last turn. But it looks like it's just going to happen here anyways. And
so all roads lead to Rome either way. And unfortunate for Kanister, that looked really, really cool. But definitely some tough draw. Kind of a comical at the end. A little complaint equity drawing that
Yeah.
third modern they're having.